All right, what is going on, guys? Happy Wednesday or happy Thursday, depending on when you are watching this. But we've got Thursday night football. We've got the Texans at the Jets. Jets' home field advantage hasn't been much of an advantage, a win percentage below 45% since they've opened the new field. So we'll have to see how that goes. Now, for the Texans, we've got some unfortunate news. Stephon Diggs is out for the year with a torn ACL. Nico Collins is on the IL until, I believe, week 10. I think they played the Lions, so still got some time there. Now, the Texans are going to have to rely on Tank Dell, Robert Woods, and Dalton Schultz for offense. Obviously, they got Joe Mixon, who has been on a hell of a tear. 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Just really been a huge upside for them. Bengals kind of let that one slip away. Now, on the Jet side of the ball, this will be the 3rd week with Devontae Adams. You've got Garrett Wilson. You've got Alan Lazard, Mike Williams, and Conklin at tight end. So they've got some weapons. Mike Williams has been quite disappointing. So, he's seeing a lot less playing time now that Devontae's in there. But I'll tell you what, defense for Houston surprised me, man. You look at the numbers, 4th in the league in passing yards allowed per game, 8th in rushing yards allowed per game, 7th in rushing attempts allowed, 5th in rushing touchdowns allowed, 1st in completion percentage. They are 9th in interception percentage, 4th in sack rate, 11th in QB hit rate. So a lot of really good things about this Houston D that caught me off guard a little bit when I was kind of looking at the numbers. Now, one area of weakness for them is going to be yards per completion. They're averaging 11.1 yards per completion, giving up 2.14 passing touchdowns per game. That is almost dead last in the league. There's only one other team that's worse than them. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Jets defense, we already talked about it a week or 2 ago. A really good defense. 2nd in the league in passing yards allowed, 3rd in passing attempts, 5th in passing touchdowns allowed, 5th in completion percentage, 3rd in sack percentage, 7th in rushing yards allowed per game. Now, where they struggle, rushing attempts. Teams are really trying to run on them. They're averaging 30 rushing attempts per game, 128 yards of rushing per game. So that part isn't exactly fantastic. And their yards per completion are identical to the Houston D. They're allowing 11.1 yards per completion. So how do these two defenses match up with the offense? Well, let's start with the Jets. The Jets primarily are 10 yards and in. 65% of their passing attempts this year have been 10 yards or less. A lot of curls and a lot of slants. They do a lot of screens and a lot of flats. So how does that match up to the Texans D? Pretty good, actually. Houston's D has been pretty susceptible to curls, screens, 20-yard out routes, and the little 10-yard curls, right? That's a really good sweet spot for Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, right? If we look at Adams, just in the 2 games he's played with the Jets, he's primarily ran a lot of slant and curl routes. So we look at Wilson, he runs a lot of slants, he runs a lot of out routes. So that bodes pretty well for the Jets, if I'm being honest. Now, if we look at Houston, they like the 15-yard out and in routes. That is where they've kind of had their sweet spot. Let's see, they've done 42 completions on the out routes, 29 on the in routes. Conversely, you look at the Jets, they've done half that. They've done 23 out, 20 in routes. So, like I said, they keep the ball within that 10-yard radius. What surprised me about both these is they're pretty susceptible to getting burned deep. We look at this Houston defense, they've allowed 28 completions of 30 yards or more on go routes. Now, the Jets D is allowed 25. So both of them are kind of getting torched in that regard. If we look at CJ Stroud, he has faced this team one time. It's been a minute. December 10th, 2023, and they got him. 91 passing yards. That said, I think we can all agree Stroud has come a long way since then. So he's been playing really well. I mean, if we look at his last 5 games, the numbers in terms of passing yards dipped there for a minute, but he had 345 to start the year, then 331, dipped to 192 and 86. So New England and Green Bay gave him some trouble. Bounced back last week against Indy, 285 yards. We look at Rodgers. he's been throwing it pretty well. I mean, his line is, I want to say 234, 232 and a half is his line. He's over that in his last 4 games. He's thrown for 244, 294, 276, and 233 against New England last week. So I do kind of like both of these guys to go over, if I'm being honest, in terms of their passing yards. The weird thing is, both of them are really heavy to go under 1.5 passing touchdowns. I do think one of them goes over. I would lean towards Rodgers, but I mean, I also kind of like Stroud too. I like Tank Dell catching some deep balls for a touchdown, but I think Garrett Wilson has a pretty nice day today. The stats just kind of back it up. His strengths and the routes he run work really well against this Houston defense. On the other, let's talk about Mixon a little bit. So he's been on fire. He's had 100-plus rush yards in 3 straight games. He's had 25 rushing attempts in the last 2 games. And we've already talked about it. Jets are allowing 30 rushing attempts per game. So now if we look at Mixon versus the Jets, very similar to Stroud. It's not really gone well. He faced them one time in 2021, another time in 2022. Obviously, he's with the Bengals. He went for 33 yards on 14 carries in 2021. He went for 24 yards on 12 carries in 2022. Now, the way Bengals utilize Mixon and the way that the Texans, totally different. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's apples to apples. Mixon's been on a pretty good tear in terms of touchdowns. He's had 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Other side of the ball, we look at Garrett Wilson. I love his line, over 59.5 receiving yards. He's been over that in 4 straight games. I thought Devontae might eat into it a little bit, but honestly, I think it's been helping him. Kind of opens up the field for him. So I do like him today. So let's talk a little bit about best bets in this game. You can see the public very heavy on the Texans. I got to agree. I've got this 23-20 Texans. So that's kind of where I'm at. My best bets here, Breece Hall over 30.5 receiving yards. Like I talked about, Jets love to dump it down. 64 completions in the flat, 34 screen passes. Kind of aligns well with the Houston D. They're allowing those passes to happen. So I think Breece Hall should get a couple and have some room to run. Garrett Wilson over 59.5 receiving yards. Talked about that earlier. The routes he runs lines up really well against this Houston D. So I think he's going to have a pretty nice day. Joe Mixon over 20.5 rush attempts. Like I said, 25 rush attempts the last couple of games. No Stephon Diggs. I think they're going to have to establish the run. I don't think this is going to be a crazy high-scoring game. So I do think Mixon will have opportunities to run the ball, and I think he's going to have some decent success, if I'm being honest, which kind of correlates with the next one, Mixon over 83.5 rushing yards. So, or you could look at his rushing and receiving yards. I want to say that's about 110, if I remember right, but I don't mind that. He's been getting pretty involved in that passing game, so I could definitely see that hitting as well, but I just want to focus on the rush yards. Aaron Rodgers over 20.5 pass completions. I mean, we already talked about it. 65% of his passes are 10 yards or less. I expect it to be somewhat tight, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets get down early or they only have like a 3-point lead. So I don't think it's anything where they're just going to start relying heavily on the run. And they give me the over 41.5. I just think it's a little low. Hopefully it's not like the Giants-Steelers game where, we get like 5 field goals in the first half, but I don't think we'll have that with these QBs. Anytime touchdowns, I like Mixon. I mean, we already talked about it. 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Pretty juiced at -130. And then I like Tank Dell anytime touchdown. I mean, I could definitely see Stroud connecting with Dell on a go route for a touchdown. So I do like that. And that's at +195. Like I said, I would lean more towards the Texans. I got this at 23-20 Texans. You could look at Kymay Fairborn over 1.5 field goals, heavily juiced at like -155. But I'll probably end up throwing that in some type of like 2-leg. I'll combine that maybe with an alt over or something like that. So I do think he nails that. All right, so that's going to be my picks, guys. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, comment with your favorite play, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll catch you in the next video.